Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. So, he's going for that. Yi Yulin had been watching Huo Yuhao this entire time, and he heaved a sigh of admiration inside. He's going to work on his formation arrays after everything else has been completed. Even though this method isn't worth complimenting, his intricate and exquisite mechanical parts are simply too beautiful. I wonder what this soul tool can do. I have to speak to this young fellow after the tournament. A smile finally appeared on Huo Yuhao's face, and his hands were starting to move faster and faster. He was piecing together the mechanical parts on his crafting desk once more, and even the Class 9 Soul Engineers, who were watching him, felt a little dazed and befuddled as he completed all those fine and delicate steps. These Class 9 Soul Engineers had good eyes. Even though they didn't really understand what these mechanical parts were for, they could tell that every piece that Huo Yuhao created was assembled compactly and seamlessly. Whole parts were starting to appear, and everything was becoming more streamlined. This wholeness was the most attractive thing in a soul engineer's eyes. Impressive. Tang Wu is such a genius. An elderly man sitting beside Yi Yulin couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The 7 judges were sitting on the competition stage, so their voices would directly affect the competitors if they were a little too loud. However, this judge still blurted these words in the end, so it wasn't hard to imagine how shaken he was by Huo Yuhao's work. Yi Yulin nodded gently and said, "You've realized it too, old Wang." The elderly man he was speaking to snapped, "Old Yi, my eyes still work. How can I not tell? However, can you tell which family is adept with those sophisticated mechanical parts?" He was naturally referring to soul engineer sects. Yi Yulin shook his head and answered, "I have seen soul tools that are supported by mechanical parts, but this is the first time that I've seen so many mechanical parts being used at the same time. However, I have a gut feeling that this youth can create a whole new era in soul tools. It looks like we were wrong before." Old Wang forced a laugh and said, "Can you not be so direct? I'm getting old, so I can't take a blow like that anymore. Even though I know that our path is a little off, we can only continue on it, now that we're old." Yi Yulin grunted disdainfully and said, "That's just your opinion. I don't believe we can't change our paths, and I'm still very young. I'll have no problem living for another 100 years. Old Wang contemplated for a moment, then heaved a faint sigh as he said, "Your relentless pursuit for more, this has always been the difference between you and I, and this is also the reason why I've always been one class beneath you. However, no matter how highly you regard this youngster, you have to call me when you want to discuss fusing mechanical parts and soul tools after the tournament. How about us?" Several other judges couldn't help but express themselves on the other side. Yi Yulin raised his right hand, and a soundproofing light screen encompassed everyone inside, so that their conversation wouldn't affect the contestants, who were still hard at work. "All of you are so shameless. You're behaving like a mosquito when it sees blood. You guys can watch and listen, but nobody can snatch him from me. You have to understand that I've paid with my blood and sweat, and I've taken out the Sun Moon Divine Needle that I've just developed," Yi Yulin said hatefully to the other judges. The other 6 soul engineers couldn't compare to Yi Yulin in terms of their status within the soul engineer world, and everyone felt a little helpless and exasperated as they watched his domineering and authoritative attitude. Old Wang immediately tried to relieve the tension. "All right, that's enough. Old Yi, we can see your efforts, we won't snatch him from you. However, everyone has discovered this at the same time. We want to study this together. Furthermore, everyone can participate in this research together. The truth is, those 3 bullshit underground organizations' tournament rules are just nonsensical. What do soul engineers compete with? Besides the soul tool itself, soul engineers compete with design and creativity. So many soul tools today have been developed from creativity and innovation. I think Tang Wu's innovation of integrating mechanical parts into his human-shaped soul tool, so that he doesn't have to create so many formation arrays, is enough to crown him as champion. If anyone dares to make an attempt on his life in the subsequent rounds, HMPH. Yi Yulin glanced at him and said, "Do I need you? Look up in the sky. What are those things? Do you think I'm useless?" One of the other judges blurted out, "That doesn't seem very nice. These 3 underground organizations have given us so much. If we ruin the tournament." Yi Yulin shot a glare in his direction, and he seemed like he was going to explode at any moment. He growled, bullshit. Let me ask you, old Zhong, is this bullshit tournament important compared to a new era of soul tools? Is it? Old Zhong was clearly losing this argument, and his voice became a little feeble. All right. If you say so, old Yi. However, we still have to try and avoid going overboard. Furthermore, if this youth can't even finish his soul tool before the time's up, he can't even participate in the following rounds. Yi Yulin grunted coldly. It's all right if he doesn't. At most, I can make another set of Sun Moon Divine Needles as a gift to him. So fierce. Old Wang thought to himself. Yi Yulin has become so shameless because of this outstanding youngster. He's making it clear that he's going to claim this kid by force. Pity. What a pity. Why didn't I meet this outstanding young man earlier? The judges were discussing amongst themselves on one side, and Huo Yuhao seemed to feel a chill run down his spine on the other side. He looked up subconsciously, and he was met with the gazes of the judges, who were staring right at him from within their soundproofing barrier. Shucks, I'm showing off a little too much. Ha! I should have made the soul tool, and pieced the shell together, before assembling all the mechanical parts inside the shell. What a pity. Forget it, I'm just going to play with them for a little bit. A playful smile appeared at the corner of Huo Yuhao's mouth. He suddenly raised his head and exaggerated his motions as he gazed up into the sky, and his facial features instantly became slack and lackadaisical. The judges had been focusing their attention on him this entire time, and they were all shocked by his sudden change of expression. Every soul engineer would have the same reaction at a time like this no matter what class they were in, and they followed Huo Yuhao's eyes into the sky. But they quickly realized that Huo Yuhao was staring up into the darkness, where there was nothing at all. What they didn't know was that when their eyes shifted away, a twisting beam of light pierced discreetly through the soundproofing layer outside and soundlessly entered the back of Huo Yuhao's head. This time, Huo Yuhao's body actually trembled. When the judges' eyes returned to his face, they saw that Huo Yuhao had a look of epiphany, and he quickly lowered his head and continued piecing his mechanical joints together. Old Wang heaved a sigh of admiration. This fellow is so scary. I actually thought he saw something, but it turns out he's just thought through some conundrum. A sudden revelation, for someone of his talent and caliber, must be pretty good. Look, he's working on his formation arrays now. Eh? His carving knife is pretty. Is that one of the ranked carving knives? Wasn't that right? Huo Yuhao was starting to craft his formation arrays on the other side. The carving knife in his hands was a strange knife that was completely green in color and filled with life energy. Yes, Huo Yuhao's separated spiritual avatar finally had hurried back at that moment. When everything fused back together, Huo Yuhao instantly felt all his mental weakness wash away in that moment. He even felt as if something had become purer within him at that moment. This is just fantastic. Huo Yuhao heaved a sigh of admiration inside. At the same time, the Life Guardian blade that had just returned to him began to dance in the palm of his hand. Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar had helped the three girls complete their operation, and he had helped them do a couple more things afterwards before they left to meet up with Shusansha and Jiang Nannan. Huo Yuhao had told them to return to the Brilliant Delight Hotel and take Bei Bei to the western suburbs, before he immediately separated from everyone, and his spiritual avatar hurried back to his main body as quickly as possible. Wang Donga was the one who had fired those two signals when they had departed the underground warehouse. A faint smile trembled on Huo Yuhao's face. He really wanted to laugh right now. His smile was full of satisfaction. We've profited so much today. This time, the Sun Moon Empire has given me a generous gift, and I've left them a generous one as well. These two presents should be enough to greatly delay their invasion plans. Huo Yuhao felt a lot more spirited as he thought about this, and his hands subconsciously began to work at full speed. All 7 judges were at least Class 8 soul engineers, and every single one of them had widened eyes and slack jaws as they stared at Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao's movements were slowing down a little, but after his epiphany in that instant, he began to work on his formation arrays rapidly, as if he had been injected with adrenaline. The first rare metal he used was a special metal known as diamond essence gold. Diamond essence gold was refined and purified from gold. Typically, only 30 grams of diamond essence gold could be purified from a single kilogram of gold. This rare metal was seldom used because it was too expensive and luxurious, but its unique characteristics were very impressive. Diamond essence gold was an excellent conductor of soul power, just like gold, and diamond essence gold's inner compact refractive structure could amplify soul power undulations. There was a special soul tool known as a soul power amplifier, and diamond essence gold was most essential in crafting it. A soul power amplifier could only be completed using diamond essence gold to craft its formation arrays. Soul power amplifiers didn't have a class, but any soul tool with one as an attachment would be upgraded by one class, with the exception of Class 9 soul tools. Only the Duskwater Alliance had given diamond essence gold to their competitors. Among them, only Huo Yuhao's crafting desk had a piece of diamond essence gold as big as an infant's fist. This was Nangong Wan's bias towards Huo Yuhao, as Yi Yulin wasn't the only person who wanted to take Huo Yuhao as a disciple. There was still the master of the Duskwater Alliance in the fray. Huo Yuhao only discovered this piece of diamond essence gold through the cracks between the other rare metals after using some of the others. This thing's value couldn't be measured with money, and even when it was in its metallic form, a single piece of diamond essence gold had the same worth as a Class 8 soul tool. Soul power amplifiers were touted as Class 9 soul tools that weren't actually Class 9 soul tools, so it wasn't hard to imagine why diamond essence gold was so valuable. Diamond essence gold was great, but it possessed some of its own unique characteristics, one of the most prominent ones being how hard it was. The diamond in its name didn't just describe its inner refractive abilities, it also described how hard it was. Diamond essence gold was so hard that even Class 9 soul engineers would have a challenging time using their carving knives to engrave and sculpt it. One would not even be able to leave a single mark on diamond essence gold if they weren't supported by formidable soul power, or if they didn't have a carving knife that was hard enough. But Huo Yuhao's green carving knife waltzed around as the judges watched, and it cut into the diamond essence gold until dust and particles flew in all directions. The diamond essence gold in his hands was quickly taking shape. His carving knife is not a ranked carving knife, one of the Class 8 judges muttered confidently. He wasn't a Class 9 soul engineer, but nobody else compared to him in terms of understanding and research regarding ranked carving knives. If he said Huo Yuhao's knife wasn't a ranked carving knife, then it wasn't. Yi Yulin frowned and said, if it's not, then the people who created the list must be blind. Or maybe this carving knife has never appeared before. We can all see its strength from how it's cutting through diamond essence gold like butter. This carving knife is probably the best I've seen at cutting through hard metal. It's better than my morning star. Old Wang nodded sincerely and said, that's true. I think this fellow isn't even using soul power, so there must be something strange about his carving knife, and it's not just because it's incredibly sharp. I suspect the carving knife itself carries some special characteristics that make it excellent at cutting through hard things. But this characteristic may be a little too intense. Yi Yulin said, can it be something that the Duskwater Alliance has taken out for him to use? I'm becoming a lot more confident in this kid. Elder Zhong laughed and said, right? The Duskwater Alliance is so astute and shrewd, yet they are willing to take out diamond essence gold for him to use. It's not hard to imagine how much emphasis they have placed on this young man, and it would be weird if you or they didn't have confidence in him. Yi Yulin smiled and said, then we will eagerly wait for this young man to finish his human-shaped soul tool. He is already today's champion in my heart. His pupils suddenly dilated as he said these words, and he exclaimed in surprise, what a man. He's already done with his formation array. Was that right? Huo Yuhao seemed to be finished engraving and sculpting the piece of diamond essence gold in his hands. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao retrieved a small bottle from somewhere and raised his hand. All the diamond essence gold dust that had fallen off from his cutting and engraving was all sucked into the bottle. This was good stuff, and even the dust and fragments had special uses and effects. Huo Yuhao began working on his second formation array after that. He didn't use any auxiliary tools, and gripping the piece of rare metal in his left hand while he grasped his life guardian blade with his right, and engraved and sculpted rapidly. Metal dust and particles flew in all directions once more. His current speed was faster than when he was making those components from before, and his hands were starting to leave after images. The current state Huo Yuhao was in was his best state for crafting soul tools. He had been hiding his abilities in the previous rounds, but there was no need to hide anymore at a time like this, because he was in the final round. He probably wouldn't meet these people ever again after the tournament, at least on good terms. Perhaps they would meet on the battlefield someday. His life guardian blade tapped lightly on the metal piece in his hands and quickly completed 3 arced cuts. They were so precise it was as if they had been measured with a ruler. Cutting its corners, slicing at lightning speed, drilling and boring holes. His fingers switched continuously from technique to delicate technique. Huo Yuhao did possess unique and extraordinary characteristics as a soul engineer. For one, he might have stronger spiritual power than even the Class 9 soul engineers judging this tournament, and there was no need to mention how agile his hands were, as he had the Tang Sect's mysterious jade hands and his training with hidden weapons. All that, in addition to Huo Yuhao's spiritual power guiding him, meant he would never make a mistake. His spiritual power would guide his hands to move with incredible precision according to whatever he was thinking. It was difficult for him to make an error throughout the entire process. Huo Yuhao had recovered from his weakness after his spiritual avatar returned to his body, and it felt as if there was some kind of sublimation. Huo Yuhao basked in this magical feeling as the carving knife in his hand danced up and down, and line after line of intricate and beautiful patterns appeared continuously on the piece of rare metal in his hands. He was completely in the mood for crafting soul tools, and he could now give all his heart and soul to this endeavor without having to worry about anything else. Xian Ziwen had remarked in admiration before that if Huo Yuhao could place all his energy and attention into crafting soul tools, he could possibly become an unprecedented Class 10 soul engineer with all the talent that he possessed. It wouldn't be very difficult for him to become a transcendent Doluo because of his ultimate ice, while his talent with soul tools was unique and otherworldly. Xian Ziwen even believed that Huo Yuhao's talent in crafting soul tools was superior to his accomplishments as a soul master. However, Xian Ziwen also told Huo Yuhao that talent was very important for soul engineers to reach Class 7. However, continuing up from Class 7 would take 10 times more effort than before. Soul engineers would never be able to progress if they didn't put their entire heart and soul into the endeavor. Therefore, Huo Yuhao needed to make a choice when he became a 7-ringed soul sage. Huo Yuhao gave Xian Ziwen an answer back then, and he had made the same choice from the day he became a soul engineer. His choice was simple: he was going to become a soul master who used soul tools, and this would become the mainstream in the future. He would never give up his journey as a soul master, because he wanted to climb all the way to the top, and also because he had to keep going for the Sky Dream Iceworm, the Ice Empress, and the Snow Empress. He had no choice but to work hard on his cultivation. Huo Yuhao conveyed his opinions to Xian Ziwen. His goal for the future was simple: he wanted to use soul tools to boost a soul master's strength, and his goal would be complete when soul tools could completely become amplifiers for soul masters. Huo Yuhao's second formation array quickly took shape, and he didn't slow down at all. All 7 judges were top-tier soul engineers, and they could naturally relate to the current state that Huo Yuhao was in. This was a state that they desired when they were crafting soul tools. This state in the world of soul engineers was known as body and mind as one. A soul engineer couldn't explicitly pursue this state. They needed to be spirited, have very deep foundations, and have a certain level of cultivation and spiritual power before they could reach this state. A soul engineer would have to enter this body and mind as one state to craft Class 9 soul tools. Typical soul engineers didn't have Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection, so they would make mistakes, and thus they could only rely on reaching the state of body and mind as one to smoothly complete such an extremely sophisticated thing as a Class 9 soul tool. The chief judge, the Star Sky Doluo, who was also a Class 9 soul engineer, stared at Huo Yuhao until his eyes seemed to become a little greedy. What a prodigy! He's an absolute prodigy. I don't care who his teacher is. I have to snatch him over to my side. This talent is something that all soul engineers crave and desire. The other soul engineers' crafting progress was at odds with Huo Yuhao's process. They were practically done with their formation arrays, and were now starting to casually forge their soul tools' other parts. The tournament's technique round was coming later. Therefore, every contestant planned to have some time to rest and recover after completing their soul tools, so that they could be revitalized for the undoubtedly strict technique assessment afterwards. The contestants began to glance at their adversaries at this point, now that they were relatively less tense than before. Huo Yuhao quickly became their focus of attention. There was no way they couldn't pay attention to Huo Yuhao. There was a human-shaped soul tool 2.5 meters tall, standing right next to him. One of the Alto Chamber of Commerce's contestants pressed the pestle and mortar in his hands the wrong way when he saw that human-shaped soul tool, causing him to waste a piece of rare metal. He almost crushed his own hand. The other soul engineers felt their eyeballs popping out as they watched Huo Yuhao. Only he Kaitu could maintain his casual and calm demeanor, because he wasn't looking at Huo Yuhao. A human-shaped soul tool. He's actually crafting a human-shaped soul tool in this tournament. This Tang Wu is a prodigy. Have you investigated his identity? The vice-founder deliberately suppressed her voice as she spoke. Nangong Wan hurriedly answered respectfully and said, "I've sent someone to investigate, but we didn't find anything. It feels like Tang Sai and Tang Wu just emerged out of nowhere. They had servants before this, so I thought they came from a sect, but we've checked every single sect and nothing. However, I don't think his identity and where he's from is important. He's participating in this tournament for the rewards, and that means he's not that wealthy. Everything else won't be a problem, we just have to brainwash him." "Dumbass," the vice-founder grunted coldly. Nangong Wan felt his heart skip a beat, and his expression changed slightly as he bowed respectfully and said, "Forgive me, vice-founder. Please advise." The vice-founder explained coldly, "He's a soul engineer, not a soul master. The things he has to do require creativity and innovation. If we brainwash him, his memories will greatly deteriorate. It's easier for soul masters, because we can guide them and train them so that they regain their memories under our control. But can he regain his memories regarding processes as fine and intricate as crafting soul tools? We have to focus on pulling him over to our side without brainwashing him." Nangong Wan hurriedly lowered his head. "Yes. We have taken out a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell to rope him in. What I meant to say was, if he doesn't wish to concede, we can consider brainwashing him if we have no other choice." "Okay. Don't let him leave our sight after this tournament," the vice-founder continued to instruct him with a chilly voice. If those who were familiar with Huo Yuhao knew everything that was happening here, they would have thought, this delicious cake will be wanted wherever he is. Inside Radiant City, shadows flew past again and again, as they descended from the sky into a courtyard beside the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy. The issue at the Royal Palace had been resolved, so the high-level soul engineers, who were responsible for guarding the important warehouse, hurried back as soon as possible. They were guarding a place of strategic importance, and they would be in big trouble if something happened. There were 8 high-level soul engineers standing guard here. Their leader was an elderly man who was tall, but a little scrawny. His eyes were sunken deep into their sockets, and his skin was very black. He looked like he shared the same blood with the royal family. Of course, ever since Xu Qianran's father, who was also the current emperor of the Sun Moon Empire, usurped the throne, the traditional royal family's black skin color had been continuously diluted by the current royal family. This person was born into the previous royal family. However, he was one of those who had mutinied against the throne all those years ago, and he was deeply trusted by the Sun Moon Empire's current emperor. However, he didn't support Xu Qianran, though Xu Qianran had been working hard at trying to bring him over to his side. This man's name was Xu Guozhong, but he wasn't loyal at all. He was big on profits and money. He had helped the current emperor usurp the throne all those years ago, and gained voluminous medicines and whatnot in exchange, which was how he had reached his current cultivation rank. They were just guarding a warehouse, but these guardians were treated extremely well. The key was their authority. Only the emperor himself could touch the rare metals and equipment in this warehouse, nobody else. Not even the crown prince had this authority. He was in full control of the inventory and everything in this warehouse. Occasionally smuggling some out to sell brought incredible profits, and Xu Guozhong himself was still a prince. He was revered, had status and influence, and was a man with real power and authority. He had some connections with the military, and he was also a Class 9 soul engineer himself. Xu Guozhong was one of the Sun Moon Empire's bigger characters. Xu Qianran had always been trying to rope him in, but Xu Guozhong had never confirmed his attitude and his position, because he was still hoping for better profits and benefits. In the end, Xu Qianran would still need Xu Guozhong even after he ascended to the throne, because of Xu Guozhong's authority and influence in the empire. Xu Guozhong was a classic miser. He didn't have to come to this warehouse every day with his status and his rank, he could have stayed in his own manor. However, taking stock of all the treasures in this warehouse was one of his greatest joys and interests. This was especially true for the stuff on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Li Chong was the manager, and he occasionally smuggled some rare metals out of the warehouse. However, he could only take from the 1st floor, and Xu Guozhong was very clear about everything on the other 2 floors. Xu Guozhong had gone to the royal palace to take a look, and then had hurried back when they realized that everything was all right. This was the first time that he had seen so many title d'honneur. How intimidating. The situation in Radiant City had become so obscure and blurry, so he hurried back as soon as possible, because he was worried about the warehouse's safety, and also about his own. Where else was safer than his warehouse 100 meters underground? Furthermore, Huo Yuhao and the others had failed to discover something. Xu Guozhong had his own underground palace in his warehouse, which was furnished with everything money could buy. His underground palace was even more luxurious and extravagant than a prince's mansion. Where's Li Chong? They walked into the courtyard and noticed that everything looked normal. Xu Guozhong felt a little more assured as he entered. In this place, he was the only one that possessed every single key. He was the only one that possessed keys for the second and the third floor. Nobody else had them. Nobody could embezzle anything, even if they wanted to. Xu Guozhong called out to his trusty subordinate once he entered the courtyard. He knew about Li Chong's tricks and the fishy business that he occasionally dabbled in, but Li Chong was very competent and capable, while also being very loyal to him, so Xu Guozhong could only close one eye to his nonsense. Everyone here were his trusted aides, and how could he keep them by his side if he didn't give them some benefits to lock them in? Other matters aside, the rare metals in here that couldn't be measured with money were one of the most important reasons he was able to attract these high-level soul engineers. Where are you, Li Chong? Come out, right now. Xu Guozhong didn't feel very good when he noticed that Li Chong hadn't come out to greet him as soon as he stepped in. Still nothing. Xu Guozhong had a lot of experience, and he realized that something was wrong. His eyes focused as he lowered his voice and growled, on guard. The Class 7 Soul Engineers that he had with him were all high-level individuals, and he had 3 Class 8 Soul Engineers with him, as well. Clanging sounds could be heard as they released their signature soul tools and activated their protective soul barriers, even as the Class 7 Soul Engineers immediately searched the several rooms around them. However, Li Chong seemed to have vanished into thin air. The other rooms were all empty, and not a single person could be seen. There was nothing else happening in this place, either. One of the Class 7 Soul Engineers walked out from a room and couldn't help but laugh as he ventured, "My lord, could he have snuck out for some wine?" Xu Guozhong's expression changed again and again as he growled once more, "No, that's not it." Li Chong has always been true to his duty. How could he have dared to step out with everything that was happening outside before this? Quick, let's check the warehouse. He activated his protective soul barrier as he spoke, and charged into the central room. He opened the wardrobe and tapped in the passcode as they proceeded into the elevator that led down to the warehouse. The elevator quickly came up, and everything seemed to be normal. Xu Guozhong took his high-level subordinates into the lift. One Class 7 Soul Engineer knocked rhythmically and familiarly on the elevator's wall. They were about to go down in the elevator when it moved, and an intense loss of gravity struck them in the next moment. "Idiot! What did you do?" Xu Guozhong was infuriated. Xu Guozhong naturally knew what this loss of gravity meant. It happened when the elevator's traps had been triggered. This wasn't the only entrance into the warehouse, but this elevator was the only entrance on their side, so it was natural for it to have anti-burglary mechanisms. If the wrong knocks were given, the elevator would instantly slide down, and would get stuck halfway through before an alarm sounded. This elevator was constructed from alloys almost half a meter thick, and its walls were extremely tough. Any thief or burglar who got stuck inside this elevator had no way out. People had made mistakes and gotten themselves stuck inside the elevator before, but those who were following Xu Guozhong had been part of this warehouse's guard for a long time, yet they were still making mistakes. Furthermore, this was crunch time. How could he not be furious? Indeed, the elevator slid down several dozen meters before they heard a soft clacking sound. The elevator was now stuck. The Class 7 Soul Engineer, who had knocked on the elevator's wall, stared at his compatriot's disdainful looks, and then at Xu Guozhong's furious expression, with an awkward look on his face. "I don't think I knocked wrongly, my lord." "You don't think you did? I'll take care of you when we get out. Quickly, reboot it." He retrieved a golden key as he spoke, and inserted it into a small and unassuming hole in the wall on the other side. A strange scene occurred. The key went in, but the soul elevator didn't react. It was like it was completely stuck, and couldn't be moved at all. A Class 8 Soul Engineer from the company suddenly thought of something, and said, "Listen, my lord. Why aren't there any alarms?" Xu Guozhong was rooted to the spot. "Yes. If something happened to the elevator, the alarms should have sounded. The people from the illustrious Virtue Hall would be alerted, and alarms would also sound in the royal palace." This was the reason why he had flown into a rage when his subordinate made a mistake, because his people messing up was very embarrassing for him. Xu Guozhong turned his golden key forcefully several more times, and confirmed that the lift wasn't reacting at all. His face became a lot blacker than before. Something's not right, someone's messed with the elevator. Quick, break it open. Our close combat soul engineers will work on that, while the rest of us will break open the bottom. Xu Guozhong had a lot of experience, and he made a decision in the blink of an eye. The warehouse had probably been invaded, and even though he had absolute faith in the booby traps and various defensive soul tool mechanisms set up inside the warehouse, he was still a miser, and he was most afraid of losing the things that he cherished most. Furthermore, there were several treasures that he doted on inside his underground palace. That's the 9th one. Yi Yulin was full of admiration, as he counted Huo Yuhao's completed formation arrays. Tang Wu had finished 9 formation arrays within 1 hour. Based on his current speed, he could finish all 18 formation arrays within the 6-hour time limit. 1 hour for 9 formation arrays. These formation arrays are also class 6, at the very least. The judges were feeling a little bad about themselves. It wasn't because they didn't have the same ability, but it wasn't easy to remain in the body and mind as one state for more than 1 hour. These judges sometimes went for an entire year without entering this state, but Huo Yuhao had managed to achieve it basically on command. The formation arrays were like pieces of intricate art Huo Yuhao was displaying on his crafting desk. Huo Yuhao himself was like a machine that didn't make any mistakes at all, a machine operating with incredible speed and efficiency. Yi Yulin heaved a sigh, and shook his head, a little helpless and exasperated. This video will end here.